two of the richest plantation owners in Beaufort County, South Carolina, made a bet on the 12th of August, 1847, that shocked the whole community and ruined one family for good. Colonel Nathaniel Pritchard challenged his longtime enemy, Judge Marcus Holloway, in a way that shocked 60 witnesses who were there when they heard the terms. Pritchard's voice echoed across the courthouse steps as he said, "Your strongest slave against my 5 daughters." The crowd went crazy with confusion. What kind of challenge could put a grown man up against 5 young women? What was Pritchard doing behind the locked gates of his estate that made him so sure of himself? And why did his daughters, when they finally showed up on the day of the bet, look at the crowd with empty eyes? They didn't seem scared, happy, or anything else. 3 doctors who looked at those girls after what happened would leave South Carolina within a year and not be able to talk about what they saw. For more than 60 years, county officials kept the record secret, and one of those daughters would die before fall. I want to ask you something before we go on with the story of what Colonel Pritchard bet on that August morning. This channel tells you about the darkest and most disturbing historical mysteries that most people have never heard of. If you want to learn more about the scary things that happened in America's past, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear and turn on notifications so you never miss a story. And please leave a comment telling us what state you're in when you listen. We love hearing where our audience finds these long-lost stories. Let's go back to Beaufort County in 1847, when a father's obsession was about to be revealed in the most awful way possible. The real story starts 9 years earlier, in the spring of 1838, when Nathaniel Pritchard's wife, Elizabeth, died after having her 6th child. In 1847, Beaufort County was at the center of South Carolina's plantation aristocracy. The Pritchard family had lived on their estate, Willow Bend, since 1782. Even by Low Country standards, Nathaniel Pritchard was seen as strange. He went to the College of Charleston and then spent 3 years in Prussia studying military history and agricultural science. He talked a lot about systematic improvement and the science of maximizing potential. After his wife died, Pritchard almost completely cut himself off from the world. He hired a housekeeper and a governess, but he kept the rest of his house from being disturbed by people from the outside. The daughters, who used to go to church and social events, stopped being seen in public. When neighbors asked, Pritchard said he was personally in charge of their education and was creating a complete system to make them great women. People didn't know what education meant in Willow Bend. The training had started out easy. More riding practice, lessons on how to find their way around, and endurance exercises that he said would make them stronger people. But over the years, it grew into something much worse. Sessions got longer and harder, and mistakes were punished by being alone, not getting enough food, or having to do the same thing over and over until they passed out. Pritchard kept detailed records of everything, including how long they could ride without stopping, how much weight they could carry, and how well they did under stress. Judge Marcus Holloway, whose plantation was next to Pritchard's, had known Nathaniel since he was a child. They had never been friends because their families had been fighting over property lines for generations, but they were always polite to each other. Holloway was the opposite of Pritchard in every way: friendly, well-connected politically, and at ease with tradition. The real break happened in July 1847 at a meeting at the Beaufort Courthouse. Holloway was talking about how to get the most work done, and he said that men were better for jobs that required strength or endurance because of their natural physical advantages. Pritchard said something that shocked everyone in the room. "You're wrong, Marcus. Physical ability isn't something you have, it's something you learn. With the right training, my daughters could beat any man here in any test of endurance or discipline." Everyone in the room started to laugh uncomfortably. Holloway, who was red-faced, thought Pritchard was being deep. "Come on, Nathaniel. I'm sure your daughters are nice girls, but let's not be silly. I'm stating fact. Based on years of systematic observation, name your challenge." Holloway pressed on, fueled by whiskey and the audience. "An endurance race, 30 miles through the hardest terrain between our properties. Your 5 daughters against my strongest worker, 3 days from now." Loser signs over the disputed 50-acre timber tract. The bet was serious because 50 acres of prime timber was worth thousands. People in the room were amazed when they shook hands. Most people thought Pritchard would back out. None of them knew that Nathaniel Pritchard never made bets he couldn't win. The 12th of August, 1847, was a hot and heavy day. The temperature was rising toward 94 degrees by 7 o'clock, when people started to arrive at the starting point. Almost 60 people came together, nearby planters, their wives, and county officials, all drawn by the newness of it. Dr. Thaddeus Cromwell came to check on everyone to make sure they weren't hurt too badly. The course went 30 miles through pine forests, across creeks, over sandy ridges, and through palmetto thickets. 3 checkpoints would make sure it was done. Samuel, the man Judge Holloway had chosen, was the first to arrive. Samuel was 32 years old, more than 6 feet tall, and a great horseman. But witnesses quickly noticed his expression. He looked very uncomfortable. His eyes were fixed on something far away, and his jaw was set tight. Then the Pritchard family came, and people started to talk. Colonel Pritchard rode at the front, straight as a ramrod. His 5 daughters followed behind him in a line, each on a gray mare. All of them wore the same dark riding clothes, which were strict and almost military. Their postures were exactly the same, with their backs straight and their hands in the same place. They didn't show any emotion on their faces. Mrs. Catherine Sheridan would later write, "Those girls looked like dolls, beautiful, well-made dolls, but dolls nonetheless. There was something missing from their eyes that made me want to gather my own daughters and leave." Dr. Cromwell came over to do some initial tests. He checked Samuel first. His heart was beating strong. His breathing was normal. He was nervous, but ready physically. Colonel Pritchard stepped in when he got close to the Pritchard daughters. "That won't be necessary, Doctor." "Sir, my daughters are in perfect health. This is just a precaution." "I said it won't be necessary. The race starts in 5 minutes, Cromwell said, and he left, upset. He had seen their hands up close for a short time. All 5 had calluses on their hands that showed they had been riding for a long time, which is more than any young lady should have. At exactly 8 o'clock, the gun went off to start the race. The 5 Pritchard daughters moved together, with their horses moving forward in perfect time. Samuel thought for 2 seconds before following. All 6 riders had disappeared into the trees in less than 30 seconds. The first checkpoint was at mile 10, on the other side of Willingham Creek. 2 officials and Dr. Cromwell waited. They heard hoofbeats at 10 to 15. The 5 Pritchard daughters came out one at a time, still moving in a strange way. They crossed without stopping, even though the rules said they should. Cromwell told them to stop, but they kept going as if he hadn't said anything. He wrote down their time, 2 hours and 15 minutes for 10 miles over rough terrain. It was fast, but not too fast. 7 minutes later, Samuel showed up, and his horse was covered in sweat. Samuel did stop when Cromwell waved him down. "Are you okay, son?" Samuel looked in the direction where the girls had gone. "Sir, there's something wrong with those girls. The way they ride isn't right. One of them, the smallest, fell into the creek. The horse stumbled, and she went into the water, bleeding from her head and with a bad cut. Her sisters should have stopped, but they kept going, and she got back on and followed. She didn't say a word, didn't cry, just got up and kept going." Cromwell felt something cold settle in his stomach. "What way?" Samuel pointed to the ridge. "That way, but I'm not chasing them anymore, sir. This isn't right. I can't be a part of it." Before Cromwell could say anything, Samuel turned his horse around and headed back to the starting point, giving up the race. Cromwell got on his horse and rode hard toward the second checkpoint, feeling a sense of urgent dread. At 11:30, he got to the ridge checkpoint. Officials confirmed that the Pritchard daughters had died 20 minutes before. They saw that the youngest had blood on her face and dress, but she didn't seem upset. They tried to stop her, but she didn't even look back as she rode past. "Should we end the race?" one person asked. "We're going to stop this," Cromwell said. "Come with me." They caught up with the Pritchard daughters 3 miles from the end of the race. Cromwell could tell something was very wrong, even from a distance. The formation had fallen apart. The riders were swaying, but 4 horses kept moving forward. The 5th horse had stopped, and its rider was slumped over the horse's neck. Cromwell pushed himself to go faster. Virginia, the youngest, was out cold. Elizabeth, the second youngest, was barely awake. Her face was pale and covered in blood from a head wound that hadn't been treated. The three older girls kept riding, but they were very upset. "Stop!" Cromwell yelled. "Stop it, for God's sake!" The older girls kept riding like they hadn't heard. Cromwell stopped Caroline by grabbing her horse's bridle. He could tell she was in shock when he got close. Her pupils were wide open, even though it was bright outside. Her lips were cracked and bleeding, and her hands were blistered. She was finally able to see him clearly. "Please," she whispered. "We have to finish. We have to." "You need to see a doctor. The race is over." "No, we have to finish. Hill." She stopped herself, her face twisted in fear. "We have to finish." Officials got to the other girls behind them. Virginia was completely out of it. Elizabeth spoke in a way that didn't make sense. Even though they were tired, Margaret and Anne kept trying to move forward. Cromwell's fear of Caroline grew as he looked at her. "What did your father do to you?" Caroline's face went blank, and the panic behind her doll-like mask went away. "We have to finish the race." The sound of hooves got closer. Nathaniel Pritchard came out, his face dark with anger. "What does this mean? Get out of their way!" "Colonel Pritchard, your daughters need medical help right away. They're fine. They've been trained for this. Let them go ahead. Your youngest daughter is out cold. The race is over. Stop them when they cross the line. You don't have the power to do that. As a doctor, I have all the power. These girls are in a medical emergency." For a second, something dangerous flashed in Pritchard's eyes. He reached for the gun on his belt with his hand. Then he seemed to change his mind, and his anger faded behind a cold mask. "Of course, Doctor. I see you're right. Let's get them home." The sudden change was scarier than the anger. They called for a wagon. People had heard about it by the time it got there. A crowd had gathered when the wagon with the hurt girls got close to Willow Bend. Pritchard looked every bit like a worried father. "Thanks for your concern. My daughters are tired but fine. They will rest now. The race may have been a bad idea in this heat, but no harm has been done." Dr. Cromwell said he had to look at all 5 girls. At first, Pritchard said no, but he changed his mind when Cromwell said he would file a formal complaint. What Cromwell found during those tests would stay with him for the rest of his life. He wrote it down in his personal medical journal, **. Proof of long-term physical conditioning that goes beyond normal or healthy muscle growth, which suggests years of hard work." End quote. **. Several healed injuries, such as broken fingers, ribs, and collarbones, that didn't heal well. The most worrying thing is the person's mental state. They don't show any emotion when they go through painful procedures. She kept asking if she performed adequately. When I told her I was worried, Caroline said, "Father says pain is weakness being corrected." It seems like she has been taught to hide all of her natural reactions to stress. His notes on the other people showed the same things. That night he wrote, "I think Colonel Pritchard has been putting his daughters through systematic physical conditioning for years. The way the injuries happened, the strange muscle growth, and the psychological conditioning to ignore pain all point to a planned program that I've never seen before." It was most upsetting when Caroline started to cry quietly after Pritchard left the room. "Mother told me to be strong enough to run away someday, but I'm not. None of us are. He made sure we'd never be strong enough for that." When her father came back, she stopped right away and her face went blank. "I think these women are being held against their will and being taught in a way that is cruel and planned, but I can't do anything about it legally. In South Carolina, a father has the right to discipline his children without limits." Samuel's refusal to go on sparked conversations among the enslaved people. He asked to talk to Judge Holloway alone 3 days later. Years later, a deposition would record what he said. "I told Judge Holloway those girls weren't right. The way they moved, didn't react when hurt, looked through people instead of at them. It reminded me of horses broken too hard. That's what had been done to those girls. When I saw the little one bleeding and climbing back on without making a sound, I knew I was watching something evil. I told him he ought to tell someone, get those girls help. He listened, But he didn't do nothing. Nobody did nothing. Holloway got the 50 acres that were in dispute. Pritchard had lost, but he didn't seem to care. Maybe the land was never the point. Maybe the race itself was the goal, a chance to show something. Willow Bend became even more cut off in the weeks that followed. No one was allowed in because the gates were closed. The daughters were no longer seen in public, even in small groups. It seemed like the family had completely cut itself off. But silence isn't the same as stillness. Something was brewing behind those gates, and no one outside could see it coming. Beaufort County slowly forgot about the strange event that happened months after the race. The time for harvesting came, and the gossip stopped. The Pritchard family stayed inside, and most people were fine with that, but some people couldn't let go. Dr. Cromwell tried to visit twice in September, supposedly to see how Virginia was doing. He was sent away both times. The second time, he saw Caroline at an upstairs window. She was holding something white against the glass, a piece of paper, a silent plea for help. He wrote to the Charleston Medical Society to express his worries without making any direct accusations. 3 weeks later, the answer came. There was no reason to intervene, because there was no evidence of immediate danger. The message was clear. Let it go. Cromwell couldn't. He started taking detailed notes on every rumor and strange detail, turning them into a private investigation that would last until he died. Caroline was doing her own investigation inside Willow Bend. She had lived in a world of strict rules and unnatural discipline since her mother died 9 years ago. Her father's training had gone from extra riding lessons to something much worse. But the race had changed something. For the first time, people outside the race had seen what was going on. Caroline had seen everything. Dr. Cromwell's obvious worry, Samuel's refusal, and the shocked faces. She had also seen her father's reaction, anger at being interrupted. Then, careful performance once he had calmed down. He was scared of being seen, and fear made him weak. Caroline started writing in a journal that she hid under a loose floorboard. She wrote about everything: training sessions, punishments, injuries, and her father's behavior getting more and more strange. She wrote in a very careful and clinical way. Her plan was easy. Gather proof. Someone would find it eventually. Somewhere, the truth would be kept safe and waiting to be found. Miss Sarah Lindley, the governess, was getting more and more uneasy. She saw training sessions, injuries, and boring talks about discipline. She saw 5 girls change from lively kids to blank-faced young women. She went to Judge Holloway in November 1847 and told him everything she had seen in the past 8 years. Holloway's worry grew as he listened. "Miss Lindley, everything you've told me is very concerning, but it's also legally meaningless," he said. "Colonel Pritchard is exercising his rights as a father. Unless you can show evidence that meets the legal definition of criminal cruelty, which is a very high bar, nothing can be done through official channels. So these girls are just stuck? Unless they get married and leave, or unless Colonel Pritchard dies. Yes, or unless someone does something so desperate that they have to step in." Miss Lindley stayed, but every day the weight of being helpless got heavier. There were small changes at Willow Bend when winter came. Pritchard seemed to be out of it, spending hours in his study reading military manuals. Training got harder. Caroline heard him mumbling about proving the concept and showing reproducible results. She realized with growing horror that her father didn't see the failed race as a warning, but as a setback in an experiment that needed to be improved. He had something else planned. Another show. Her father came into the library without warning on a cold January night. "You are the oldest, so you know what I'm trying to do." Caroline's face stayed blank. "Yes, Father. Most people are weak. They give in to weakness and call it humanity. Your mother was weak, and she got pregnant again and again until it killed her. But you and your sisters, I've made you strong. You're perfect examples of what humans can become with the right training, and soon everyone will see what I've made." Made? Father? The word slipped out. His face grew darker, refined, improved, made into something better than nature intended. He stepped closer. "Your opinion doesn't matter. Your feelings don't matter. You exist to prove a principle. You and your sisters are my life's work, and I won't let sentiment get in the way of that work. What comes next will require complete commitment. I'm planning another demonstration, bigger than the race, more controlled, and more scientific. Caroline wrote in her journal after he left, "Father is planning something worse. I can't put my finger on it yet, but I can see it in his eyes. We are no longer his daughters. We are samples, tests, and proof of concept. Whatever he's up to will either reveal him or completely wipe us out." In February, strange things came in the mail. Medical equipment, scientific tools, and books on physiology. Pritchard hired an architect to turn an outbuilding into a training facility with special equipment and locks that could be opened from the outside. Caroline saw her father giving her sisters different drugs in March. These drugs were performance enhancers and conditioning supplements. Margaret lost her energy. Anne's hands shook, and Virginia had times when she seemed to be out of touch with reality. They looked at Caroline with blank confusion when she tried to talk to them about saying no. Years of training had worked. Caroline knew time was running out by April. She needed help from people who weren't close to her. She wrote a letter with careful language about the new facility, the drugs, and how her sister's health was getting worse. She ended with a simple request. Someone needs to step in before Father's next experiment starts. It took weeks of planning to get the letter out. Finally, in early May, Caroline gave the letter to one of the women who did laundry and was a slave. The woman agreed to try passing it to someone at Holloway's property, though she made clear the risk. Colonel Pritchard called his daughters together 3 days later. His face was cold with anger. He had Caroline's letter. Who wrote this? No sound. Pritchard moved slowly. I know one of you wrote this letter of treason, calling me cruel. He stopped in front of Caroline. It was you. The woman who tried to deliver it admitted it. Everyone knows your handwriting. He crumpled the letter. I'm disappointed. I thought you understood, but you're still weak and sentimental. Father, Shut up. Your sister has let our family down. What should we do? The younger girls didn't say anything. Complete isolation. Caroline will be moved to the new facility until she's ready to recommit. The rest will keep training as usual. Remember what happens to those who betray discipline. 2. That night, Caroline was locked in the renovated outbuilding, which was just one room with high windows and a cot and training equipment. Pritchard leaned in close before locking her up. You wanted help from the outside. You'll get your wish. I'm hosting doctors and scientists from Charleston in 2 weeks. They're coming to see a demonstration of my training methods, a controlled scientific exhibition that will prove my theories. You and your sisters will show what you can do under strict conditions while being watched and measured. By then, you'll know that working together is your only choice. The lock turned and the door closed. Caroline was alone and realized that her efforts to get help had made the thing she was afraid of happen faster. She counted down the hours until the demonstration, not sure if surviving was even the best thing that could happen anymore. Outside her window, spring turned into summer, and Willow Bend stayed quiet, holding on to its terrible secrets until the time came when they would be revealed or buried for good. Ruth was the name of the woman who had tried to deliver Caroline's letter. When Pritchard confronted her, she was scared, but also relieved. At last, someone might know the truth. Pritchard didn't hurt her in any way. He just sold her 2 days later to a broker who sent enslaved people to the brutal Mississippi Delta labor camps where they would die. It was clear what the message was. But first, Ruth had shown the letter to Samuel and asked him to read it out loud. Samuel learned what it said by heart. He knew exactly what had happened and why when Ruth went missing. He went back to Judge Holloway and wouldn't leave until he was heard. Samuel read Caroline's letter out loud, word for word. Judge Holloway, sir, I know I'm out of line, but that man is going to kill those girls. Maybe not all at once, but he will. Ruth has already paid for trying to help. Someone with power needs to do something. Holloway didn't say anything. Finally, what do you want me to do? March onto his property and tell him to stop? I don't have any legal power. The law says a father has full power. Then the law is wrong, sir. The statement hung in the air, but Holloway didn't get angry. He seemed tired. Maybe it is, But laws that are wrong are still laws, until they are changed. That takes decades. These girls don't have decades. No, sir. What are you going to do? What I can do, within the law and custom. It won't be enough, but it's a start. Holloway casually visited some of his neighbors several times and steered the conversations toward the Pritchard family. He said he was worried about the upcoming scientific demonstration and suggested that a few neighbors should go to make sure everyone behaved. His real goal was to get witnesses. These girls may have only had public accountability to keep them safe. He also wrote to Dr. Cromwell and asked him to come as a medical observer. Cromwell said yes right away. Caroline, on the other hand, stayed alone. Food and water came through a small hole twice a day. 3 days into the demonstration, her father came to see her and told her that she was expected to help. You'll take part completely. You'll do your best. You'll show me everything I've taught you without complaint or hesitation. If you don't, your sisters will be punished instead. Caroline didn't say much. Yes, Father. This demonstration will decide everything. I've asked 12 doctors, 3 professors from the Medical College of South Carolina, and a few well-known planters to come. They'll watch, measure, and write down what they see, and then they'll finally understand that my methods work. Caroline tried to think after he left. She had lost track of time because of being alone, but she forced herself to pay attention. Her father wanted her to work with him. What if she did the opposite? What if she used the demonstration to show him off? She thought of something. It was risky and might not work, but it was all she had. People started coming to Willow Bend on the 19th of May, 1848. Throughout the morning, carriages brought Charleston's top doctors and well-known planters. Pritchard welcomed them with open arms, acting like a cutting-edge researcher eager to share new discoveries. The renovated outbuilding looked like a medical theater, with chairs set up in a semicircle around an open demonstration area. Medical equipment lined one wall. There were devices for measuring heart rate, lung capacity, strength, and endurance. Everything was made to look scientific, objective, and clinical. Pritchard called the meeting to order at 10 o'clock. 23 men were ready to go. Thank you, gentlemen. Today you'll see something that has never happened before. For almost 10 years, I've been doing a systematic experiment on my 5 daughters to see how to improve their physical and mental health. My hypothesis is that human abilities aren't set in stone by nature, but can be greatly improved by proper discipline and getting rid of weakness. What you'll see today is proof. He pointed to a door. My daughters have been through a lot of training to build their endurance, pain tolerance, physical strength, and mental discipline. They've learned how to push through their natural limits through systematic desensitization and progressive challenge. Today, you'll see them use these skills while you watch and measure. Everything will be written down and able to be repeated. One doctor raised his hand. Colonel Pritchard, I have to say that I'm worried about the moral implications. These are your daughters, not lab rats. They're both, and they've gained so much. They're stronger, more capable, and more disciplined than any other women of their kind. He opened the door. The 5 Pritchard girls came in. People who were watching stopped talking. They walked in a line, with their steps, postures, and dresses all matching. Their hair was pulled back tightly. There was no expression on their faces. It looked like they were 5 different versions of the same robot. Caroline was in front. She was pale and thinner from being alone, but her posture was perfect. She kept her eyes on the road ahead. These are my daughters, ages 17, 16, 15, 13, and 11. Over the next 4 hours, they'll show you different skills. You can look, measure, and check. Everything is real. I encourage you to be skeptical. That's science. Every man there would have a different story about what happened next. The daughters had to do harder and harder physical tests, like holding difficult positions for long periods of time, holding weights until their muscles shook, and doing the same exercises over and over again without stopping. There was very little reaction, no complaints, and no signs of distress throughout. When they got tired, they got back up and kept going without being told. Dr. Cromwell became more and more upset. He had seen soldiers trained before, but this was different. These young women had been trained to hide all of their natural reactions to stress. Colonel Pritchard, how long have they been training this hard? 9 years, Doctor, since not long after their mother's death, step by step and in a planned way. And have there been any injuries? Of course. Injuries are part of growth. Broken bones heal stronger. Pain teaches adaptation. Several people shifted uncomfortably. Then Pritchard said the last test would be an endurance test. Each daughter would run non-stop on a treadmill made just for them until they were too tired to go on. Medical observers would keep an eye on vital signs the whole time. The goal is to show better conditioning and pain tolerance. This was Caroline's opportunity. During endurance tests, her father couldn't easily intervene without compromising scientific validity. She would have time to communicate. The treadmills were set up so that all 5 people could run at the same time, facing the audience. When her father told her to start, Caroline began to run, but not the same way her sisters did. Caroline let her form get a little worse while they kept their mechanical accuracy. Then, as she ran, she started to talk in between breaths. 9 years of this every day. Broken bones, hunger, being alone, not training, torture, not science, cruelty. He calls us experiments and says we're proof that people can be broken and remade. Pritchard tried to silence her, but Dr. Cromwell stood up. Colonel, let her talk. If this is a scientific demonstration, we should look at all the data. Other people who were watching agreed. Pritchard was stuck because he was so strict. Caroline kept talking, and her sisters were now paying attention. Something about her voice was breaking through their conditioning. He starved us to see how little we could live on, broke our bones to see how we'd heal, kept us alone for days, and told us we weren't human, just specimens. Virginia, the youngest, tripped and fell. Caroline, what are we doing? Because Father told us to, Margaret said without thinking, still running, and her voice shaking. No, Caroline said in shock. We're doing this because he broke us, scared us, made us forget we could say no, and made us forget we're human. Elizabeth stopped. And then Anne did too. They stood there, breathing hard, and looked at each other with growing confusion. Only Margaret kept running, her legs moving at a steady pace while tears streamed down her face. People who were watching sat in stunned silence. Dr. Cromwell wrote with great anger. A few doctors had stood around, not sure what to do. This was no longer a scientific demonstration. It had turned into something else, a public breakdown of the conditioning Pritchard had put in place. Pritchard tried to stop the treadmills to get control back, but Caroline, who was still running, yelled, "He trained us to be perfect! Perfect soldiers! Perfect experiments! He wanted to show that people could be trained like animals! He wanted to sell his methods to the military. We're not his daughters anymore, but we're his product." The last word, product, hung in the air like an accusation. Pritchard stopped Caroline's treadmill by grabbing her arm hard enough to leave marks. But the harm had already been done. The people watching had heard enough, and so had her sisters. Virginia was crying now, in front of everyone, for the first time in years. Elizabeth sat on the floor, and her blank mask broke into fear and confusion. Anne stood still, shaking. Margaret had stopped running and was staring at her father in growing fear. "What have you done to us?" she said in a low voice. Dr. Cromwell got up. "Colonel Pritchard, this demonstration is over. These girls need help right away. What I've seen isn't science, it's systematic abuse that looks like research." Many others agreed. But Pritchard, who was trapped, played his last card. "You're reacting emotionally instead of scientifically. My daughters are upset because I pushed them too hard." "They'll be fine. They always are. Just let them rest, and they'll be fine." "Normal?" Cromwell's voice was sharp. "Colonel, this conditioning and the state of these young women are not normal at all. Get out of my house right now. You have no power here. These are my daughters, and they are here of their own free will." Judge Holloway came up. "Nathaniel, I've known you for 30 years. What I saw today is against the law and against morals. You've put these girls' health and sanity at risk. I'm leaving now, but I'll be reporting this to the county magistrate. There will be an official investigation. Look into it all you want. You won't find anything illegal. A father has the right to teach his kids. Your investigation will go nowhere. Holloway's face was serious. Maybe, but I'll file it, and every man here saw what happened. That might mean something. People who had been watching started to leave, very shaken. Dr. Cromwell stopped at the door and looked back at the 5 daughters who were huddled together. It was the first time he had seen them support each other. Caroline looked into his eyes, and there was a desperate plea there. But what could he do? Pritchard turned to face his daughters as the last observer left. Caroline was ready for rage. But what came was worse. Cold disappointment. Like a scientist watching experiments that didn't work. You've messed up 9 years of work. All of you. Especially you, Caroline. Tomorrow, we start over with corrective training. No demonstrations, no observers, and no interference. Just us. Caroline pulled her sisters close as he left and locked the door. They were crying now that the conditioning had finally broken. Caroline held them and made promises she wasn't sure she could keep. We'll find a way out. What happened today has to mean something. But deep down, she knew the truth. The observers had been horrified. But horror wasn't action. People had seen, documented, and acknowledged their exposure. But they were still stuck, waiting for their father's corrective training. The demonstration changed everything and nothing. The truth was known, but couldn't do anything about it, which might be the most cruel thing of all. Days after the protest, Beaufort County was rocked by a carefully planned scandal. The story spread quickly, and it was shocking, but impossible to talk about openly. Women whispered, men argued in private, but polite society stayed quiet in public. Judge Holloway gave his report to the county magistrate. It was long and damning. It talked about systematic conditioning that was almost torture, psychological manipulation that kept normal responses from happening, and proof of multiple injuries over the years. It asked for an immediate investigation. The magistrate, who had gone to college with Pritchard, read the report carefully, then put it away, and did nothing. When Holloway pushed, the answer was clear. Pritchard hasn't broken any laws. He's taught his daughters in a way that some people might find harsh, but harshness isn't a crime. Unless you can show that he's trying to kill them on purpose, there's no legal basis. The man has been abusing those girls for 9 years straight. Whose definition are you using? The law gives fathers almost all the power. I can't take them away unless a judge says they are in immediate danger of death. So they just have to trust him? That's the law. They have to marry and leave, or he has to die. Holloway left feeling the same helpless anger that others had felt. The system didn't have a way to keep these girls safe from their own father. But being exposed had effects, even if they weren't legal. Pritchard was alone socially, no more invitations, and business contacts became less important. At church, other families stayed away from him. He was the only one in his pew. The mood inside Willow Bend became more and more oppressive. Pritchard started corrective training, a strict schedule meant to help him get back in charge. Daughters got up before dawn to work out. Their meals were carefully measured and timed, and they weren't allowed to talk except during certain times. Miss Lindley was told to keep an eye on her all the time, but something had changed in a big way. The daughter situation wasn't normal, and the public exposure reminded them of that. Even corrective actions couldn't fully remove the seeds that Caroline's words had planted. Sisters started to talk to each other in small ways, like looks, small gestures, and tiny acts of rebellion. The youngest, Virginia, changed the most. She was only 2 years old when her mother died, so she didn't remember much about life before training. But Caroline's breakdown had brought something to life. She started to ask questions, quietly, carefully, but with determination. Why do we do this? What would happen if we stopped? Where would we go? Caroline tried to be honest while also keeping her from getting her hopes up too high. We can't stop here because we have nowhere to go. Women alone have no rights, no money, and no safety. Then we're stuck there forever, until something changes. Caroline didn't know what could change. In the middle of June, something did change, but not in the way people thought it would. During morning exercises, Margaret fell down. For weeks, she had been getting weaker and weaker. The performance enhancers their father had been giving her were having bad effects. She didn't get back up after she fell. They called for Dr. Cromwell. He looked at Margaret and saw that she was tired, underfed, and possibly poisoned by whatever drugs Pritchard had been giving her. He told her that she needed to rest in bed, eat well, and stop all of her training. Pritchard said no, just a small setback. With the right discipline, she'll get better. Colonel, your daughter is in danger. She is. More powerful than you think. Her body is failing. She's 17 and weighs 92 pounds. Thanks for your input. I'll take care of my daughter from here. Cromwell had to leave, but he went straight to Holloway. This is it, Marcus. She's going to die. If there was ever a reason for emergency help, this is it. Holloway's face was serious. I'll go to the magistrate, but Nathaniel will say you're exaggerating the danger and that he's giving the right care. The magistrate won't do anything unless Margaret dies. So we wait for her to die? We shouldn't wait, I said. We need to try something else. What method? Social and economic pressure. It was in his best interest to let them marry and leave. Someone with honor was willing to help them. Holloway carefully put a plan into action. In late June, he went to Pritchard with a business offer. He could give Pritchard the disputed timber tract as a wedding gift. Pritchard's oldest daughter would marry Holloway's oldest son in return. It would bring properties together, end the land dispute, and make a formal alliance. Pritchard listened with a cold mind. Caroline was 17 years old, which was old enough to get married. A union would fix the damage to society. He would get the timber tract back, but he was wary. Why now, Marcus? Even though we've had problems, you're still my neighbor. It's better to make it official and useful than to keep fighting. My son needs a wife, and your daughter needs to settle down. It's practical. I'll need some time to think. Of course, but Margaret's illness makes me think you should make sure at least one of your daughters has a good future sooner rather than later. The message was clear. Death was unpredictable. It took Pritchard 3 days. Margaret's health got worse during that time. Cromwell whispered to Caroline when they were alone for a short time, "There may be a marriage proposal coming. If it does, take it. It may be your only way out." My sisters, we can only save one at a time. If you get out, you might be able to help them from outside. We can only save one at a time. 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 3 days later, Pritchard called Caroline to come. Judge Holloway has asked me to marry his son James in August. I've agreed. Whatever you say, Father. Don't think this means you're free. You'll still be under your husband's authority. I'll stay in touch with your sisters, and if you try to mess with their training, there will be consequences. Yes, Father. Caroline snuck into Margaret's room that night. Her sister was awake and had a fever, but she was clear-headed. I'm getting out, Caroline whispered. I'm going to marry Judge Holloway's son. Tears filled Margaret's eyes. Get out of here. I'll get help from outside. I'll figure out how to save you all. Father won't let you get in the way once you're gone. I'll find another way then. I won't leave you. Margaret weakly squeezed her hand. Promise me something else. Tell the truth. No matter what happens to us, make sure people know what he did. Don't let this be forgotten. I promise. Caroline felt the weight of that promise as she walked away. She was running away, but she was taking her sister's fate with her. The wedding was on the 15th of August, 1848. As the date got closer, things got worse. Pritchard took more control over the other daughters. Margaret's health got a little better, but it was still weak. Caroline counted the days and tried not to think of it as being left behind. Virginia went missing on August 10, 5 days before the wedding. At breakfast, the alarm went off. There was no one in her room when they searched the house. The bed was made, but not slept in. Her riding clothes were missing, and one horse was missing from the stable. Pritchard was very angry. He quickly put together search parties, but Virginia had a full night's head start. It seemed that she had learned her father's lessons about navigation and survival better than he had thought. The search went on for 3 days. A farmer 30 miles north said he saw a girl who looked like her on the 3rd day. She had asked for food and water and then ridden on. She had been gone for a long time by the time searchers got to the farm. Pritchard had a terrible realization. His youngest daughter had used what he had taught her to get away from him. She had learned everything he had taught her about survival, endurance, and navigation, and she had run away so well that professional trackers couldn't find her. The wedding went off without a hitch on August 15, but Virginia's absence cast a shadow over the celebration. Caroline and James Holloway got married in a small ceremony. Pritchard was there, but didn't say anything. He was so angry about losing 2 daughters that he couldn't hold it in. Caroline looked back as she left Willow Bend. Margaret, Anne, and Elizabeth, her other sisters, stood in a window on the 2nd floor. She waved goodbye with her hand, trying to say everything she couldn't say. "I'm sorry. I'll be back for you. I haven't forgotten." They raised their hands back, making 3 identical motions, and then they were gone. Caroline had gotten away. Virginia had run away. But 3 daughters were still stuck. And the effects of what had happened were just starting to show. It was a strange change for Caroline to be Mrs. James Holloway for the first month. Her husband was nice to her, gave her space, and never yelled at her. But kindness couldn't change years of conditioning. Caroline jumped at sudden movements, ate small amounts even when she was told she could have more, and woke up at dawn every day. James saw her several times at night, standing by windows and looking toward where Willow Bend was. "You're safe now," he'd say. She kept her promise to Margaret and said, "My sisters, Anne and Elizabeth." She told James and Judge Holloway everything. Holloway wrote it down carefully. "Can we use this to get rid of my sisters?" Caroline asked. "Legally, no. Your testimony is strong, but you don't live with him anymore. A court would say you're biased. We would need testimony from someone who is currently there or proof of ongoing abuse." Caroline sent a letter to Miss Lindley, the governess. She didn't get a response. She wrote again. Finally, Miss Lindley sent a short note that said, "I'm sorry, but I can't help you. Please don't write again. Another door is closing." Then, in the middle of September, news came that changed everything. Margaret was dead. The official cause was a long-lasting fever and a weak constitution. Dr. Cromwell knew better. She had died from not getting enough food, being too tired, and the long-term effects of whatever Pritchard had been giving her. A friend of Pritchard's, who was also the coroner, said the death was natural. Caroline heard the news while sitting in the hallway parlor. She didn't say anything. She just stood there, walked to her room, and didn't come out for 3 days. Something had hardened by the time she came out. Sadness had turned into determination. "I want to see my sisters. Margaret's funeral is a good reason for Father to say no without looking mean." Holloway agreed and said he would go with her. They rode to Willow Bend on September 20. It was a small, sad event with a few neighbors and Miss Lindley, who was red-eyed and quiet. Anne and Elizabeth stood next to their father. They were both very thin and had blank looks on their faces. Caroline stood next to Elizabeth during the service. "Are you okay?" Elizabeth's answer came in a flat, trained voice. "Yes, we're fine." "Elizabeth, please, it's just us. Tell me the truth." For a moment, something flickered. Then she whispered, "It's worse since you left. He's always angry. He pushes us harder and says he needs to prove his methods still work, even after 2 failures. Caroline, I'm so tired. I promise I'll get you both out." "How?" "Margaret tried to stay. Virginia tried to leave. And you tried to marry out. One is dead. One is missing. And you're gone. What do we have left?" Pritchard came between them before Caroline could say anything. "Caroline, how nice of you to come." His voice was cold. "I hope you're doing well." "Yes, thank you, Father. I hope you're remembering what I taught you," he said, which was a threat. "I remember everything you taught me, Father. Every single thing." There was something dangerous in his face. After that, he looked at Elizabeth. "Come on, we're leaving." Caroline couldn't sleep that night. She kept seeing Elizabeth's tired face. She thought about Margaret, who had died at 17, and Virginia, who was missing. She also thought about what her mother had said before she died. "Please, don't let him have them alone." Everyone had failed that request, and now one person was dead, another was missing, and 2 were still stuck. That night, Caroline made a choice. She would find an illegal way if the law wouldn't help, if society wouldn't get involved, and if all other options were closed off. An unexpected arrival saved her from having to do anything. A stranger came on October 3rd, Reverend Thomas Hewitt from Charlotte, North Carolina. He told me something about Virginia. "Your sister is alive and well. She came to our church 6 weeks ago, tired and scared, but unharmed. She told us about getting away from a dangerous situation, and we gave her shelter while we checked her story. Why didn't you tell us right away?" Virginia begged us not to. She was scared of being sent back. We looked into it before telling anyone. What did you find out during your investigation? Enough to make me believe Virginia's fear was real. I talked to Dr. Cromwell, neighbors, and Judge Holloway's staff. The picture was very disturbing. Virginia is safe with us, with a Christian family. She's getting better, but she has nightmares. She asked me to send you a message. He gave Caroline a letter. "Caroline, I'm free now. It took me 3 weeks to get to Charlotte, and I thought I would die a few times, but I'm free. I used everything my father taught me to get away from him. I can't come back. He'll catch me again if I come back. I had to leave Anne and Elizabeth, but I had to save myself. I hope you get it. Please let them know that I'm alive and well. That might give them hope." Virginia? Caroline read it 3 times, crying all the time, feeling both happy and sad. What will happen to her? The family caring for her will keep her permanently if she wishes. She'll be safe, educated, treated kindly. And what about my dad? Virginia asked us not to tell him where she is. She's 11, which makes her a minor. Your father could demand her return, but our church is ready to fight back. We have ties to groups that know how to protect vulnerable people from unfair authority. If Colonel Pritchard tries to get Virginia back, he'll have to deal with a network that's dedicated to keeping her safe. Caroline knew what he wasn't saying very well. Groups that helped enslaved people get away were starting to realize that women who were being abused needed the same kind of help. Virginia had found a group that would protect her. Caroline felt something change after Reverend Hewitt left. Virginia had done something that seemed impossible. There had to be hope for Anne and Elizabeth if an 11-year-old could do that. But fall turned into winter, and hope was still hard to find. Caroline went back twice more, but both times she was turned away. Pritchard sent her a cold letter telling her that she shouldn't get involved. In early December, Miss Lindley sent a short note saying, "Elizabeth is very sick. Your dad says it's the flu. Dr. Cromwell hasn't been called yet. I fear the worst." Caroline rode right away to Willow Bend, but they wouldn't let her in. She went straight to the county magistrate and asked for help. The magistrate said he would look into it, but he didn't do anything right away. Anne showed up at the Holloway plantation 3 days later. She had ridden all night and got there at dawn, shaking with fear and cold. Anne fell into Caroline's arms when she ran out to meet her. "Help me. Elizabeth is dead." Anne had left in the middle of the night, riding a horse through the dark and using the navigation skills their father had taught her. She was scared of getting caught, but even more scared of staying. Elizabeth's death had broken the last bits of her conditioning. Anne said, "She died 2 days ago. Father said it was the flu, but it wasn't. She had been sick for weeks. He wouldn't let Dr. Cromwell come. He kept giving her medicines that made her worse. At the end, she was delirious and calling for Mother." "Where is she now?" "Father buried her yesterday, quickly, and without a formal funeral. He just looked at her grave and said that her body was too weak and that not every subject survives the conditioning process, as if she were an experiment that failed." Judge Holloway wrote down everything very carefully. "Anne, I need you to tell me everything. Every detail about the training, the punishments, the medicines. Your testimony may be what we finally need." Anne gave the most complete account yet, over the course of 3 hours. She talked about the daily routine, the food restrictions, the isolation, the punishments, and the medications. She had scars on her back from being hit with a riding crop when she didn't do her exercises. She talked about how training got harder after Margaret died. She also told Caroline and Virginia things they didn't know. Father kept detailed records of everything, measurements, timings, and drug dosages. He called them research logs. He kept them locked in his study, but Elizabeth found the key and sometimes copied parts of them. Do you know where Elizabeth's copies are? Behind a loose board near the window in her room. We need those records. That's the proof we've been missing. The next morning, Judge Holloway filed a petition. The magistrate agreed to a limited investigation because the scandal was getting worse. A county official would go to Willow Bend to check out what Anne said. Pritchard fought the order, but he didn't have many choices. A small group arrived on the 15th of December, 1848. It included Judge Holloway, the county official, Dr. Cromwell, and 2 deputies. They were allowed to talk to staff, look around the building, and get any documents they needed. What they found was worse than they thought it would be. Cromwell said that the training center had instruments of systematic torture disguised as exercise devices. The main house had signs of strict, prison-like control, like locks on doors, barred windows, and rooms that were stripped of comfort. But the records were the most damaging. In Pritchard's study, there were 9 years of carefully kept research logs. He had written down everything, including his daughters, in the same way that a scientist writes about lab subjects. One entry, 2 weeks after Margaret died. Subject M's failure shows how important it is to carefully screen. Her constitution was not strong enough. This indicates the necessity for either diminished intensity or the selection of exclusively the most physically resilient subjects for forthcoming applications. The other subjects seem to be more resilient, but Subject E's condition is getting worse, which is worrying. Behind the loose board in Elizabeth's room were her copies of some entries and a note that said, "If I die, please let someone know this happened. Don't let him say that I was just sick. He killed us slowly and said it was science." The county official came out looking pale and shaken. He told them to dig up Elizabeth's body. Dr. Cromwell did the autopsy and found that the person was severely malnourished, had several broken bones that hadn't healed properly, and organs that looked like they had been poisoned by chemicals. Legal action followed, which was groundbreaking but frustratingly limited. In 1848, South Carolina had no way to punish parents who abused their children. But Pritchard's records made things different. His own logs showed that he had given his daughters drugs that he knew could be harmful, pushed them beyond what was safe, and saw their deaths and decline as data points. The prosecutor charged him with reckless endangerment that led to death, not murder, because murder would require proving intent. However, his actions showed such a blatant disregard for human life that they crossed the line into criminality even by the standards of the time. In the early part of 1849, the trial lasted 3 weeks. Caroline, Anne, Dr. Cromwell, Miss Lindley, and a number of household staff all gave evidence. Pritchard's defense said that he had been doing legitimate scientific research, that the deaths were tragic accidents caused by constitutional weaknesses, and that his methods were legal. There were different opinions among the jury. After 2 days of talking about it, they found him guilty of reckless endangerment, 10 years in prison. A legal win and a terrible comment at the same time. 2 young women had died after being abused for 9 years, and their father might get out of jail before he turns 40. But it was also the first time in South Carolina history that a father had been found guilty of a crime for how he treated his kids. The precedent had been set, though it was not very strong. Nathaniel Pritchard spent 7 years in prison before dying there in 1856 from pneumonia. He left everything to his faithful daughters, but by that time, only Caroline and Anne were left to inherit. Virginia was legally free from his control in 1850, but she was not included in his will. The plantation at Willow Bend was sold. Caroline and Anne both couldn't stand to keep it. Anne used her part to start a small school for girls in Charleston. She never got married and spent her life teaching. Caroline stayed with the Holloways. She and James had 3 daughters, and she raised them with care. She kept Elizabeth's note and some pages from her father's logs. Virginia remained in North Carolina, taking the family name of those who'd sheltered her. She got older, got married, and had kids. She kept in touch with Caroline, but never went back to South Carolina. She wrote in letters that the nightmares eventually went away, but they never completely went away. After Caroline died at the age of 52 in 1883, her personal papers were given to the Charleston Historical Society. There were a lot of things, like her journal, Elizabeth's note, copies of their father's research logs, and a letter Caroline wrote but never sent in 1849. To people who read this in the future, my dad thought he could make people better by controlling them in a planned way. He thought that with enough effort, natural limits could be broken. He was incorrect. Instead, he showed that cruelty can look like science, that absolute power can corrupt even parental love, and that people can make sense of any horror if they see their victims as experiments instead of people. His obsession killed 2 of my sisters. 3 of us lived because we ran away from him. I hope that by the time these papers are read, society has learned how to keep kids safe from people who want to hurt them, even if those people are their own parents. I leave this record in the hopes that it will serve as a warning, a testimony, and a memorial to Margaret and Elizabeth Pritchard, who deserved so much more. For decades, the papers were put away and mostly forgotten. A researcher looking into child welfare laws found them in 1910. Her published analysis became part of the growing movement to establish legal protections for children, contributing to reforms that would slowly begin to limit parental authority and establish children's rights as distinct from parental property rights. Before it was divided up, the Willow Bend property changed hands a number of times. By 1900, the only thing left of the original plantation buildings was the family cemetery. There were 4 markers there: Elizabeth Pritchard, 1,834, 1,848; Margaret Pritchard, 1,831, 1,848, and 2 smaller markers for their parents. But there is also a 5th grave that showed up in the early 1900s without any official record. The sign says, "To those who suffer in silence, may truth one day find voice." Local historians have never been able to figure out who put it there or who might be buried under it. The truth did get out, but it took a long time and wasn't perfect. The Pritchard case is now a footnote in legal history, and people sometimes bring it up when talking about parental rights and child welfare. Until now, most people outside of academia didn't know how bad it really was. The records kept by Caroline tell a story that should not be forgotten. They show how unchecked power, rationalized cruelty, and systematic dehumanization can happen anywhere, even in good homes, and even in the name of progress and improvement. The Pritchard girls, Caroline, Margaret, Anne, Elizabeth, and Virginia, should have had better. They deserved to be safe, loved, have normal childhoods, and futures without fear. Most got none of those things. But by speaking the truth, even when society didn't want to hear it, they left behind something valuable. Proof that they existed, that they suffered, and that what happened to them was wrong. That evidence is important. Every voice that speaks out against cruelty is important. Every record that is kept is important. It matters that everyone who won't look away. The Pritchard sisters learned this too late for Margaret and Elizabeth, but not too late for their memory. What do you think went down at Willow Bend? Do you think that even today, systematic abuse could be hidden behind education and research? Please leave your comments below. If this story touched you, send it to someone who likes dark historical mysteries. To hear more true stories from America's past that have been forgotten, subscribe to Liturgy of Fear and hit the bell. Remember this, until next time, the past may be over, but its lessons will always be there for those who want to hear them.